and welcome to the Big Data Debrief, a new interview series here at Datanami, where we talk to CEOs and other executives who are impacting the world of big data. I'm Alex Woody, the managing editor of Datanami, and I'd like to welcome Justin Borgman to the show.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Absolutely. Justin is the chairman, CEO, and co-founder of Starburst, the commercial entity behind the open source Trino query engine. I've known Justin for a few years now, and I can't wait to have you guys get to know him. So, Justin, thanks for being on the Data Debrief, Big Data Debrief. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and glad to be here.
Excellent. We haven't talked in a few months. The last time we talked was, I think, back in April or May, before a lot of news hit in June, specifically at the Snowflake and the Databricks conferences around Apache Iceberg. What was your initial reaction to that news, and how does it sit now, 3 months later?
Yeah, I think it's big news, and I think it's really great for customers and end users because essentially what it means is that Iceberg has become the de facto standard for open formats working within your lake. And prior to that news, of course, there was some degree of debate. It was clear that Iceberg was winning, but it was still some degree of debate on other competing formats, including the Delta format, the Hootie format, and so forth. And this really solidifies Iceberg as the de facto standard. And I think that takes the question off the table for customers, so they don't have to worry, am I betting on the wrong format? They now know that Iceberg's going to be supported by all the major players, whether that's Snowflake, Databricks, or even ourselves here at Starburst.
Okay, and at Starburst, did you have customers that were using, I guess, both Delta Lake and Iceberg, or even Hootie too? Or did you see any trends in usage at Starburst?
Yeah, absolutely. We support all three formats, and so we do have customers using all three of them. But I think maybe because of that vantage point, we saw pretty clearly that Iceberg was gaining momentum and winning market share, day by day or month by month. So for us, it was no surprise that this summer became effectively the summer of Iceberg, where the market sort of finally solidified around Iceberg as the format.
It's so hot this summer, we probably could use more Iceberg, right? But maybe you could tell our viewers a little bit about Starburst and the business offerings that you have there.
Sure. So Starburst is the company behind an open source project called Trino, which was born at Facebook. It is essentially how many of the leading internet companies perform data warehousing style analytics, but doing so within a lake. And so, in fact, when Iceberg was first created, some of the first queries ever run on Iceberg were actually Trino queries. Netflix is a big Trino user as well. In addition to querying data lakes and being able to do that with great performance and scale, Trino also has the nice benefit of being able to federate to other data sources as well. So it can really access all the data within your overall ecosystem, not just the lake. And that combination of being able to have really high performance analytics on the lake, as well as federating to other data sources, is part of what makes it unique. And so Starburst is the company behind the project. My co-founders are the leading creators, and we continue to drive the project forward.
So Justin, after Databricks bought Tabular, they said that their Delta Lake table format would essentially merge with Apache Iceberg, that the differences between the two formats would decrease over time, and they would essentially be the same. Is it important to your customers that they see progress in that, in bringing those formats together?
I do think that's the vision. I think what matters most, though, for our customers is that Databricks' embrace of Iceberg, when they were the biggest vendor who was sort of against Iceberg prior to that acquisition, means that Databricks will support Iceberg itself. So I think what that means is customers themselves now are choosing Iceberg, and that's going to really force Databricks to make that a reality and support it as a first-class citizen.
Great. And what about the cloud giants? we don't hear a lot about what AWS, Microsoft, and Google are doing with Iceberg. They've kind of been lurking in the shadows of Iceberg, so to speak. Do you expect them to come out strongly in support of Iceberg?
I do. I think they were taking a wait and see approach, trying to see which format would win out. I think, again, this summer has kind of proven that to the world that Iceberg is the de facto winner. And I think the clouds will recognize that as well. I think many of them have Iceberg development going on behind the scenes already in order to support that format. And again, I think from the customer perspective, this is a win win. You have basically all the players in the space embracing this singular format, and that really means for the first time in database or data warehouse history that the customers own their own data in a format that is open and not locked into any one vendor.
And are you seeing any movement in investment in Iceberg and lake houses at this point? It's been 3 months. You were saying customers were a little bit that they didn't want to put their data into a lake house if they were unsure of the future of the format. Is that is our budget starting to loosen up around investments in lake houses?
Yeah, I think for sure. I think again with Iceberg's popularity now becoming clear, uh, customers are safely developing plans to migrate and move data into the Iceberg format. And I think what they're expecting along the way is that they're going to get a lot of cost savings by doing that. Cost savings because now they can compete or choose engines, make the engines compete, I guess you could say, for the compute side of the equation. And that's exactly where Starburst plays. We're very happy to be one of those competing engines, competing for the attention and customers who want to deploy an engine on top of Iceberg. And in fact, along that regard, we've been investing heavily in the entire end-to-end management of the Iceberg format. That's everything from ingesting the data to maintaining it, managing it, optimizing it for performance. So I think the world, as we see it going forward, especially into next year, is that customers are going to standardize on Iceberg, and then they're going to play the different engines off of each other. And again, when engines compete, I think the customer wins.
So who is the loser in all this then?
Yeah, I think the various vendors who've been really counting on their lock-in as a means to retain their customers. I think those walls are coming down. This is like the Berlin Wall falling maybe at the end of the Cold War, in that customers now have the freedom to move their data wherever they'd like, and I do think that will be detrimental for some of the more high-priced proprietary cloud data warehouses on the market. They can get very, very expensive. And previously, customers didn't really feel like they had choice. Now they do.
And previously there was always a trade-off, right? If you went for one of those closed engines, you weren't going to be able to move your data, but you arguably were going to get better performance. Is that still going to be the case, or do you expect the open source engines to catch up and surpass some of the closed engines?
I think already today it is so incredibly close from a performance perspective that you really have to factor in cost performance. Because again, all of these systems are parallel query engines, meaning that you're going to have multiple machines working on the data, performing those analytics. And it may be more cost effective for you to add one more machine to your 100 node cluster, let's say, to get the same performance. Even though you're adding one more machine, it still may be a third the price, right? And so that's where cost performance ultimately becomes the key metric, not just pure performance, but really cost performance, where you measure the dollars it takes to perform the query that you're trying to complete. And in that regard, I do think that's where we're seeing the biggest uptake in our own platform. Is dollar for dollar, we're about a third the price of a traditional cloud data warehouse, and that's very compelling.
And the other announcement that came out of the Snowflake conference was the launch of its Polaris catalog, and that competes with the Databricks Unity catalog. It seems like we have another format war brewing on our hands, right? With the metadata catalogs. What is your take on that?
I do. And in this particular war, I actually am very intrigued by Polaris. I think what Snowflake has smartly done here is chosen to open source it from the start and embrace a community of participants. So, Starburst, for example, is one of the participants in the Polaris project. And by virtue of doing that, you're able to again try to create an independent standard where Unity, by contrast, is clearly a Databricks project controlled and owned and operated by Databricks. Polaris is taking an open approach. Now, it's a bit ironic, of course, because Snowflake is the proprietary cloud data warehouse, that they're choosing the open approach here. But I think it's the right one. And we're seeing a lot of our peers, other vendors in the space, taking a really serious look at Polaris as an open catalog.
Okay. Databricks is also pledging total openness with Unity Catalog too, right? So they can't trump Snowflake in terms of who's more open. And there are other metadata catalogs out there. How do you see, I guess, this battle shaping up? Is it going to be, obviously it can't just be who's more open than the other. Is it going to be features and functionality, or how do you see it playing out?
I think it's going to come down to just how well these catalogs support multiple engines, because that really is what the customer wants. I think from the customer standpoint, they very much believe that they're going to have a multi-engine environment where they may have Snowflake for some tasks, they may have Databricks for some tasks, they're going to have Starburst for some tasks. And how can all three of these platforms leverage the same catalog? For us, we've always preached optionality as a core value proposition, and we do support a wide variety of catalogs, everything from the Hive Metastore to the Glue catalog in AWS to Polaris catalog and others. And I think that's what customers want. They want that flexibility to be able to work with multiple engines off the same catalog. And I think there'll be question marks as to whether or not Databricks is really going to allow that to happen. I think people don't completely trust Databricks when it comes to the openness of the approach and whether other vendors will really be able to make their engines work as well with their catalog.
Okay, and Databricks is aligned more with the Linux Foundation for its open source software and projects, whereas Snowflake is. They've told me that Polaris is going to be contributed to Apache, right? It's going to be the Apache Software Foundation, and those two foundations slightly different. How do you see that impacting which one of these gains more adoption?
Yeah, and we do have experience with both. I think that Apache offers perhaps the most pure sort of democratic approach. And democracy, of course, always has its pros and cons. But I do think from the standpoint of soliciting widespread participation from a wide variety of vendors, Apache probably has the edge there, whereas the Linux Foundation allows a bit more corporate control. Apache is more about the users. Linux is more about the corporate entities that participate. And so there is a subtle but important difference between the way those projects tend to be run. And so I do think that's probably another small advantage for Polaris, is that they're going to have widespread contribution from a variety of participants pretty much right out of the gate.
Okay, great, thanks. And not all projects at Apache, go on to have great lives, right? Obviously, Hadoop was a big thing 10 years ago, and it sort of, the whole Hadoop idea kind of imploded, right? Or maybe not the idea, but all the projects around it and the companies involved. It just didn't really pan out. But now we have with Iceberg, it seems almost like the idea is coming back now, right? You can centralize your data, and you can have multiple engines using it and without having them cross each other up. So it's almost like they've achieved that Hadoop dream.
Yeah.
What is your take on that?
I think that's an excellent way of putting it. And as you probably know, Alex, because I think we met each other way back when, my first startup was in the Hadoop space. It was founded
Right.
back in 2010. It was called Hadoop. It was a early SQL engine for Hadoop. You could call it perhaps one of the earliest lakehouse approaches. We didn't call it that back then, but it was a lot of the same concepts. Open formats in a lake, querying it via SQL. So you're absolutely spot on. I now look back on Hadoop and I feel like it was sort of like the version one, data lake
Right.
or lakehouse approach. And, over the past 10, 15 years, that's been highly refined. And, I think one of the things I learned, and I was a much younger entrepreneur back then, of course, as well, is that databases take a long time, to really build and perfect and get equivalent performance. And I think, 10, 15 years ago, Hadoop just could not match the performance of traditional data warehouses like Teradata, for example, at the time. And now they can. And I think that's a big part of the distinction is the performance has changed dramatically, as well as the functionality. And, we touched on Iceberg in the opener. Iceberg allows you to do updates and deletes, modify data. And that really, again, I think closed both the performance and feature gap between a traditional data warehouse and a data lake approach. So you're spot on. A lot of those concepts were pioneered then, and I think perfected today.
Great. And now that we've finally achieved that Hadoop dream, it seems like all anybody wants to talk about is generative AI, right? Has generative AI, has it sucked all the oxygen out of the room, or is there still any appetite for regular SQL analytics?
Yeah, great question. It's definitely a hot topic. There's no doubt about it. A lot of discussion and I would say investigation and education going on right now among our customers. But I do think that everyone recognizes that you need to have a solid data foundation before you can do anything with AI, right? Like if AI is this new engine, data is its fuel, and you need to have the right pipelines, the right refineries, the right mechanisms to gain access to the data that you need to train your models, refine your models, build RAG workflows, et cetera. So it's you can't do one without the other, is I guess what I would say. And I think it just creates added emphasis to get your architectures up to date and modernized so that you can leverage them for these more AI centric activities. And by the way, I think this also creates added focus on open architectures because AI is a very resource intensive activity. And you've got to be designing an architecture that is not only going to stand the test of time, but also not bankrupt you in the process. And I think that's where open architectures, again, are very compelling for customers.
Great. And are you getting any tailwinds at Starburst with Gen AI? Is that helping drive customer investment?
Yes, it is, particularly when customers think about those RAG workflows working off of private data sources. Again, you need to be able to have access to those private data sources in a governed way. Recently, JPMC announced their own AI assistant that they're rolling out to many of their employees to help aid their work. And that's a great example of a company that needs to be able to access proprietary databases internally, and you can't have one AI assistant over here leveraging data from a different department that they don't have access to. Of course, that's very important within banks to have these Chinese walls between different groups and departments. And I think that's indicative of the direction that enterprise customers are going to go. Is really the need to sort of create governed connectivity to the various data sources in their RAG workflow.
Great. And so, what is Starburst's generative AI strategy?
So we really want to be a complement to the AI projects that people have, and again, become perhaps a necessary component of those RAG workflows. That's where we're hoping to attach. We think your models are only as good as the data that you train them on, and refine the results leveraging the freshest, most up to date data that your data sources can provide. And so we see it as a necessary ingredient as you build your AI strategies. Now, in addition to that, we've also started to incorporate it in our product itself from a natural language to SQL generation perspective. So you can express a query in natural language that will now translate into a SQL syntax and be executed by our engine. So I think a lot of database providers will do something similar, but that just shows you the way that generative AI technologies are starting to transform the industry.
Okay, great. And please tell us a little bit more about Starburst. The company has been venture funded. It was valued at, I think, over $3 billion a few years ago. What's one thing about the company that you like to tell my viewers?
Yeah, I think one thing that a lot of people don't realize is when Iceberg was created, it was really created to be used with Trino. And again, Trino is the project that Starburst is behind. And the importance of that association is that it has become the de facto open architecture among some of the largest internet companies in the world. You know, Apple, LinkedIn, Lyft, they're all using Trino on top of Iceberg. And so I think when people think about lake houses, they need to think about Iceberg and they need to think about Trino. And hopefully that will lead them to think about Starburst as well.
Great. And you have a Bachelor of Science degree in computer science from UMass Amherst and an MBA from Yale. Which one of those degrees helped you more to get to where you are today, and why? Essay question.
Truly, yeah, I think both were absolutely essential to getting me where I am today. To be honest with you, UMass was such an amazing experience for especially a student who didn't have a lot of money necessarily going into college. I paid my own way, and public universities make that a possibility. And I got a tremendous computer science foundation, became a software engineer. So it was a great platform to get started in my career, and was absolutely critical. Yale was a very different experience. I was surrounded by incredibly talented students and an incredible alumni base, which became a great launching pad for me to make connections, ultimately raise money for that first startup that we referenced earlier, and kind of launch my entrepreneurial career. So I think they both played an important role in shaping who I am today.
Okay, great. And I wanted to let my audience know also that Justin was one of our people to watch for 2023 in the Datanami People to Watch program. I was rereading that today, Justin, and one of the things you told us was that you were training for a triathlon. I was wondering how that training is going.
It's still ongoing. I've set 2026 as my goal, and specifically that's an Ironman triathlon, which is a
Ironman.
little extra crazy. That's right. But yeah, my assistant is keeping me accountable and making sure that I'm training, 3 times a week, and we're making progress. We're making progress.
That's great. Well, hopefully you achieve that goal and finish an Ironman next year. That would be awesome.
Thank you very much.
Great. Well, that wraps it up for today. I want to thank Justin for joining us here on the Big Data Debrief. Thank you very much, and hope you have a nice day.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it.